I have the distinct honor of hosting a very special guest whose passion for language and words has transformed into a groundbreaking cultural institution. She is a former first grade teacher who, after reading about the Museum of Mathematics, was inspired to create a museum that celebrates the beauty and power of words in all their forms. Through her vision and dedication, she founded Planet Word, a museum in Washington, D.C. that opened in October 2020 and has since become a beacon for language arts. Please join me in welcoming the founder of Planet Word, Anne B. Friedman.
Thank you. That's a nice introduction.
Can you share some of your favorite childhood books and the authors who inspired your love for reading and language, and how they influenced your appreciation for the power of words?
Sure. Can you see the background of my office? What's behind me?
Yes, it looks very pretty.
It is a wallpaper made with 12 pages from my favorite childhood book, believe it or not. My favorite book growing up when I was, young, elementary school, was The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. And the reason why I have wallpaper of pages of the Secret Garden in my office is because the author, even though she was English, lived for a time just a block away from the Franklin School, which is the home of Planet Word. So when I was deciding where to house the museum, when I found out that Frances Hodgson Burnett lived nearby, I said, okay, this is a sign from heaven that Planet Word should be located in the Franklin School, even though it was a historic building, very run down. It had been abandoned for 10 years. So it would mean that I would have to restore a National Historic Landmark property and add all of that complication to my plans. But it was like this message from God saying, you should be in this building. But so why did I like The Secret Garden so much? I'm from Iowa. I grew up in little towns in Iowa and then in Des Moines. And so when I read The Secret Garden, and it's about this orphan girl from India who comes to live on the moors of England in an old manor house with her reclusive uncle. And, it was just very different from anything I'd known. And I fell in love with the idea of travel and castles and big houses and orphan girls. And so that is why I was so attracted to that book. And another thing about The Secret Garden that I've come to realize later in life is that it was probably the first book I ever read that had dialect, because Yorkshire English is pronounced very differently from standard, British English. And so the characters from the moors of England were written, their dialogue was written, in that way. And so, it was the first time that I had to sort of struggle over words and hear someone's different accent coming through the page. So that's a very long story to tell you about one book, but, I'm a lot older than you. And so, a lot of the books that I was influenced by and loved very much probably wouldn't be the ones that would be really popular today, except that I did end up teaching fifth grade. Before I taught first grade reading and writing, I taught fifth grade. And so I had to educate myself on what kids were reading at that time. And so what I would do is listen to books on tape in my car as I commuted back and forth from my house to the school. And so I heard books like, The Dark is Rising, Freak the Mighty, other books that were much more contemporary and more popular then. And so I educated myself on a lot of the popular literature for upper elementary school during those drives back and forth.
So I'm assuming the monetary investment to rebuild this place must have been really high. Did you have any help when building Planet Word?
Well, I wasn't building it. I was restoring they're called National Historic Landmarks with capital letters, and they are run by the National Park Service. And, they're National Historic Landmark buildings all over the United States. But so what you can do to restore them is very constrained. You have to meet with the National Park Service, and in Washington with the Capital Planning Commission and the State Historic Preservation Officer. And every change that you want to make to such a historic site has to be approved by all those bodies. Now, I actually paid for the restoration myself. And so in parallel to that process, working with the contractor and the architects and all these architectural preservation bodies, I also was raising money for the actual museum galleries and exhibits. And so there I had lots of help from very generous people who liked my idea of a museum of words and language and helped. And so, we have a big donor wall in the museum where you can see the names of all those people and sometimes companies who helped fund the actual creation and installation of the exhibits. But the building itself, I funded the restoration of.
Your career took a fascinating journey from investment banking to teaching. How did these experiences contribute to your vision for Planet Word?
Yeah, no, that's not the usual path, is it? But I wouldn't say that I really had a career in investment banking. It was my first and second job. I worked as an investment banker, but it wasn't really for me. I shouldn't have been there, but I met fantastic people who are still my friends to this day. And one thing, since I was a recent college graduate and I'd actually taken computer science, which was very new when I graduated, I knew how to do things like word processing that the investment banks really needed to produce these publications for marketing and things like that. So that was kind of the role that I did. Plus, I arranged meetings and luncheons and speakers, and that has served me in very good stead. I'm still doing that with our programming at Planet Word, thinking about speakers and events like that. But from there, I moved abroad where I got married, and my husband and I lived in the Middle East for basically a decade. And what I did there was still connected to finance, but I worked as a translator and then as a copy editor for a newspaper in Beirut, and then as a copy editor at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem when we lived there. And so I became a copy editor, because one thing that people don't know about translators, you think, oh, they have to know the foreign language perfectly to be a translator. But actually, what you really need to know how to do is write in English, because you're turning this limited vocabulary in another language into written English that has to be correct and punctuated and spelled correctly and good grammar. And so I got really interested in copy editing. I became a professional copy editor. And that's sort of the ironic thing, is that Planet Word is what we call a descriptive language museum. And so we celebrate language as it's actually used and not, what grammar textbooks would say is right or wrong, or, so even though I know grammar really well and can edit anything that you write and put the commas in the right places and know the spelling, that is not something that we emphasize at all at Planet Word. We don't have anything about grammar or diagramming sentences or anything like that, because the point of Planet Word is to encourage people to use their words, to find joy in language any way they want. That could be songwriting or joke writing or oratory. So not to intimidate people into thinking, oh, I'm no good at English, I don't know the rules. No, not Planet Word. That's not important.
Is there like certain languages you offer at Planet Word so people can also understand?
No, actually, we don't teach. So we do have our biggest gallery is called the Spoken World, and you can learn 2 little mini lessons about 30 different languages. They're recorded, we call them language ambassadors, and they're on iPads circling a gigantic LED covered globe, and it works with voice recognition technology, and the globe lights up and responds to your trying out words and phrases in a different language. But so we have indigenous languages and endangered languages and ones you'd expect, like Spanish and German and French. We have tonal languages, like from Mandarin and Vietnamese that have different tones in their language. We have click languages, a lesson about click languages from Africa. And so we try to have a representative smattering of languages of all types so that you can try them out and learn their unique characteristics and what's really cool about them.
Can you tell us more about the challenges you faced bringing Planet Word to life and the key milestones along the way?
Well, so you said when we opened, October 2020. Now, I don't know if you remember what was happening then, but that was a global pandemic.
Yeah, I remember. I think I was in 7th grade.
Probably. So most museums were closed. And here we were trying to open and trying to tell people, come mingle in a place with other people who might have COVID. We don't know. But so that we were ready to open. We were supposed to open in May of 2019, but because of COVID, there were slowdowns. Things weren't shipped on time. Our contractor changed their schedule, so not all people were working all the time together in an effort to, limit the spread of COVID. And so what we did instead of what we expected was we had a virtual opening, and we had a video that featured all sorts of people who were supporting Planet Word, who were big advocates for what we were doing. And that included people like President Obama and the soprano Renee Fleming, and people who did spoken word and beatboxing, and some of our biggest donors. And they all gave videotaped messages for our grand opening video. And a lot of them, they would never have come in person to Planet Word in the midst of the pandemic. But because we had a virtual opening, they would appear on tape for us. And then we opened the doors that day, October 22nd, to just 35 people per hour. And you had to register in advance online. And we changed the way traffic would flow through the museum. We had, one-way staircases. So all the people were going in one direction and wouldn't necessarily pass each other and spread germs. Because you might not remember, but we didn't know back then how COVID was transmitted. And so we have a lot of hands-on experiences at Planet Word. Things that you touch screens and books that you touch. And we didn't know how afraid people would be to touch anything. So we had hand sanitizer stations everywhere. And we had gloves. And we had masks that you could borrow if you didn't bring your own. Everybody had to wear a mask. And the funny thing is that people still wanted to come. So we started increasing the number of reservations from 35 per hour to 50 to 75. We increased the number of days we were open. We started with only being open 4 days a week. And slowly we increased that to 6 days a week, which is what it is now, and 150 people an hour. If, that's max. That's our limit because of, we don't want it to be too crowded in any event, COVID or no COVID. So it wasn't the way we planned, but it worked out. And it also, some people say scarcity makes for demand. And so because it was very hard to get into Planet Word at first, it created a buzz, and everybody wanted to come here. And so it really ended up being fine. And people did not get sick from being here. We had rules, about staying 6 feet apart from each other, and it worked out.
So in a way, COVID kind of helped you guys.
It was a little bit of a silver lining. I hate to say that, something that killed so many thousands of people, but for us, it really didn't prove to be a big problem. We didn't have field trips for our first 1.5 years of operating. But we developed virtual field trips. So we were able to sort of pivot and change a lot of things. We didn't have the programming in our auditorium. It sat empty for 1.5 years. People didn't want to come to a program and sit in an auditorium next to somebody else. So that was sort of a negative.
At least you guys still had regulations to keep people safe.
Absolutely.
That was still good.
We sure did, yeah.
At Unbanned Coolies, we advocate for diverse books and are strongly against book banning. How do you see Planet Word contributing to the celebration and protection of diverse voices and stories in literature?
So it's one of our reasons for existence, because we're trying to find ways for people to read more, appreciate words, that's our mission. So one way you do that is by finding books and voices and experiences that are relevant to people who visit. And that meant from the very beginning, the books in our magic library, the poems in our poetry nook, the speeches that we have, the songs in our karaoke style gallery are all diverse. They are diverse in terms of the age group. that they'd appeal to? The books, are they for children or for adults? We have all of them. We have characters from every culture you can imagine. And that was on purpose, definitely intentionally chosen. But so what does that mean? When Banned Books Week rolls around, it turns out that without even trying, many of the books in our Magic Library that come to life are frequently banned or challenged. Why? Because those are the books that people from groups that are often discriminated against or on the outskirts of society see themselves reflected in. So we chose those books so there'd be something here to appeal to everybody. And it turns out those are often the books that get banned. So, if you go through the list of books that we have in our Magic Library, there are at least probably 10 or 12 of our 74 that are frequently banned or challenged. And it's not because we picked them because of that, but because of what we're trying to do in finding books and other types of content that speak to people that they can relate to.
What do you hope visitors, especially young people, can take away from their experience at Planet Word? And how do you see the museum evolving in the future?
Well, first of all, we hope they have fun, because Planet Word is we have 6 core values, and 2 of them are fun and playful. And so we like seeing our visitors have smiles on their faces, having a social experience, because a lot of what happens here is done with other people. We have a lot of voice recognition technology, and so people are shouting things out, and it's quite fun like that. But in the end, we don't want people just to come here and have a fun time, and we want them to actually take something away, take a message away, and that message is that words matter, which sounds like a cliche, but what we want people to know is words matter. You can use them to divide. You can use them to bring people together. It's your choice. So we hope that by going through the museum and listening to our video interactives or experiencing our big room size activities, that you will get the message that it's up to you to decide how you're going to use your words, and also to pay attention to the words you use and to the words used around you. So, and for instance, we have a humor writing gallery where people tell jokes to each other. And that sounds sort of silly or fun, but actually there's a method to our madness, because to understand jokes, you really have to think about the words that have been used and how they have double meaning, or they're homophones, And so everything that we have included makes you really focus on what are the words that are being used and how do they affect you. In our oratory gallery, speech writing, we point out all the techniques that the speechwriter was using that make it effective. We have an advertising copywriting gallery. It's all gamified about the words used in print ads. You really have to focus on those ads to figure out, why is that so effective? What did that mean? In our songwriting gallery, It's a karaoke lounge, but the words on the screen are also, they're highlighted and annotated so that you can learn about the different techniques that the songwriter was using to make it a really great, cool song. You know, what kinds of rhyme, alliteration, all these techniques that make you pay attention to words and see, I could do that. You know, that would be really powerful because our museum is different from what most people have experienced. For instance, we have a gigantic word wall. It's 40 foot wide, 22 and a half feet tall. It's built out of 1,000 three-dimensional words, and it's voice activated. So people choose what words they want to hear the history of, the etymology of. And depending on what visitors are there and what the voice recognition software picks up, you'll hear a different story than the people who were there previously. Now, it's not 100% different each time you go, but there are different elements. So we've had plenty of kids who say, oh, I've been to Planet Word 4 times. And we have so much content. We have 74 books that come to life. Well, you're not going to do more than 2 or 3 at a time. We have 23 songs in our karaoke gallery. You're not going to sing more than 1 or 2. So there's tons of content to explore every time you come. It's not going to get too stale. And we're adding new content all the time. We have these video interactives on the walls where you can dive deeper into a subject. So we just added an interactive, we call them Beacon, about multilingualism. We've got one on dyslexia. We've got them on over more than 20 topics. So it's a little bit overwhelming. There's, you know, a lot of people come for an hour and a half or 2 hours, but they come back and back and back because they don't have enough time to experience everything. And it's fun.
To Anne, thank you so much for sharing your experiences and insights with us. It's been truly inspiring to learn about your journey and the incredible work you've done to celebrate and promote the power of language. And for everyone watching, if you haven't visited Planet Word yet, now is the perfect time. It's an interactive, engaging, and free museum where you can explore the beauty of language in all its forms. Bring your friends and family to experience the magic of words firsthand and be inspired by the power of language. Until next time, keep reading and exploring the world through words.
Thank you.